It all begins with a knight who appeared ready to attack a group of armed men, led by a uniformed figure. As he prepared his attack and unleashed it, the entire field was left desolate. Suddenly, the uniformed man approached him and ordered the armed men, who turned out to be tools rather than weapons, to begin working. In truth, they were laborers. One of these laborers remarked on the magnificence of Count Well, our protagonist, using his magic to aid them. Well, however, was eager to return home, but Roderick, the uniformed man, requested his assistance in clearing some stubborn rocks. Later, Well teleported back to his home, where he was warmly welcomed by 3 girls. A 4th girl named Elise soon appeared, and they all gathered around the table to share a meal. Their conversation revolved around how Roderick exploited him for labor. Well, despite his magical prowess, Asil considered himself an office worker at heart. Moments later, he announced his intention to change clothes and, upon crossing a door, transform into an adult man, an office worker. He took off his coat and began preparing a meal. Exhausted after finishing, he fell asleep at the table without eating. Upon awakening, he realized that everything had changed. He was now a child attending a lavish wedding. Convinced it was all a dream, he attempted to go back to sleep but was interrupted by his father, who insisted he present himself to the gathering. Apparently, they were at a formal ceremony. Frightened by the uncertainty of his circumstances, Well remained silent. However, Eric appeared and expressed gratitude for Well's presence at the wedding of his older brother, Kurt. Eric introduced himself along with our protagonist, whose full name was Wendelin Von Benno Baumeister, although they affectionately called him Well. Eric went on to explain that his brother had married Amelie, the 2nd daughter of Lord Mainbach. Similar to Well's family, they too belonged to the nobility. Upon hearing this, Well presumed himself to be the 3rd son of an influential family and indulged in the sumptuous feast laid before him. The following day, when Well awoke to have his breakfast, he was met with hard bread and a soup that barely resembled broth. Furthermore, Eric was absent, supposedly off fishing according to his parents' account. The family's dwelling bore visible signs of neglect and decay. Curious and puzzled, Well confronted his brother, who revealed the harsh reality that despite their noble status, they were impoverished. The grand festivities of the previous day had been nothing but a facade. Still, Well clung to the notion that being the 3rd son must entail some privileges. To its astonishment, more siblings began to emerge: Helmut, Paul, Herman, and the mention of Walter and Karl, his half-brothers. The revelation left Well coming to terms with his status as the 8th child. As he grappled with the complexities of his family situation, Well examined a map of the Kingdom of Helmut with its capital in Stuttgart. To the south lay the Duchy of Bleichritter, home to the southern mercantile hub, Breitberg. Beyond a formidable mountain range stood the Baumeister domain, a humble village of peasants. Intrigued by the departure of his older siblings, Well ventured to bid them farewell. They explained their decision to renounce their inherited lands in favor of financial independence. By doing so, they relinquished their noble status and intended to pursue education and employment in the city. Eric imparted a piece of advice cautioning Well against indolence to avoid future regrets. On that very day, Well sought solace in his father's library, only to find it scantily furnished with books. However, a crystal ball tumbled from a shelf, revealing instructions for measuring magic. Initially skeptical, Well decided to experiment with it out of sheer curiosity. To his astonishment, he discovered that he possessed immense magical potential, a power that even attracted the attention of a nearby magician. Fueled by this newfound realization, Well scoured the library for books on magic, but came up empty-handed. Turning to his father, who couldn't read, he inquired about additional books and was instead instructed to gather firewood. In the forest, while collecting firewood, he attempted to perform magic using a nearby branch, but his efforts proved futile. It was at this moment that a passing magician sensed his latent magical abilities, and seeing him afraid, he introduced himself as Alfred Rainford, a magician from the Duchy of Bleichritter, who promptly disarmed him and discarded the branch. To their surprise, the discarded branch triggered a chain reaction, toppling a boulder that roused a colossal boar, which charged menacingly towards them. Seizing the opportunity, Alfred guided Well in channeling his wind magic, and together, they successfully repelled the ferocious boar. Undeterred, the enraged boar returned for another assault, but Alfred effortlessly dispatched it with a mere flick of his finger. Amidst the ensuing calm, Alfred looked at Well with amazement and reassured him that he had the potential to become a formidable magician. Well found himself back at his home, where he was handed a cup of boiled water referred to as tea. This reminded him of the tea Alfred had given him when he proposed to teach him magic, and how after that he seemed to stuff the entire boar into a small bag on his belt. Alfred informed Well that their magic lessons would commence the following day, but cautioned him to keep their arrangement a secret. If anyone were to discover their partnership, he would become the lord of the village, effectively disinheriting his older brother. Back at home, he contemplated this new power dynamic, envisioning himself stripping his brother of his inheritance and lands. Their first lesson involved the combination of Alfred's magic with his own. As they attempted to synchronize their mana, Alfred sensed that Well possessed even greater potential than he did. However, Well noticed that Alfred's hands were unnaturally cold. In another part of the household, Well's father discovered that the crystal ball had been moved. Suspecting the kid of tampering with it, he laughed at the thought, convinced that his son was disappointed at not having any magical abilities. As the days passed, Well made remarkable progress, mastering advanced magic with Alfred's guidance. The magician even brought a basket of vegetables for Well's family, claiming that he had gone out to fetch them. That evening, the family marveled at the abundance of vegetables on their table. Well's father, however, began to taunt him, suggesting that he had used magic to procure them, all the while laughing heartily. His older brother, on the other hand, remained solemn and worried. Their magical lessons continued and Well's powers grew. He learned to detect things with magic and even successfully hunted a horo, a bird-like creature. As they enjoyed their meal, Well offered Alfred some wasabi, a fiery pepper he had found deep in the forest. Alfred accepted the challenge and consumed it without flinching, leaving Well in awe. However, he asked for him not to go back there as there are Amy monsters there. After dinner, Well began practicing with water and confided in Alfred that he suspected his older brother was spying on them. He in turn proposed that the kid should consider becoming an adventurer, following in his footsteps. Unexpectedly, a sinister black aura began enveloping Alfred's arm, causing him immense pain. He believed that he still needed more time. The next day, Alfred explained to Well that the Adventurers Academy was located in the Duchy of Bleichroder. Given its bustling commercial environment, even children could join guilds and sell hunting items. This revelation excited Well because it meant he could potentially earn enough money to pay for his academy tuition. However, to gain admittance to the academy, Well needed to learn a travel spell that allowed for flying. Alfred, demonstrating the spell, carried him aloft, offering him a breathtaking view of the world below. That night, the ominous dark aura returned, spreading across Alfred's entire body and causing him intense agony. The following day, while practicing his flight spell, Alfred informed Well that their training would conclude the next day. Well had made remarkable progress and was now ready to embark on his journey. That evening, while they were dining at home, their father recounted a tale of a talking in the nearby forest, an creature with intelligence. This living could be distinguished by its icy coldness, lack of taste, and a gradual loss of sanity, ultimately transforming into a mindless zombie. Well suddenly realized that Alfred was one of these living creatures. He rushed out in search of him, who confessed to becoming a talking 5 years ago, while on an expedition into the evil forest to aid the ailing son of the Duke. With 2,000 men at his side, the group fell victim to monsters and Alfred's mana eventually ran out, causing him to succumb. However, he had become a talking due to an unresolved matter, the need to train his successor, Well. Alfred revealed that, as a final test, he would teach Well sacred magic and that he would have to purify him, ultimately ending his existence. The encroaching darkness threatened to consume him entirely, making the purification necessary. At first, he resisted the idea, but he ultimately agreed to carry out Alfred's wishes, tearfully, Well followed his master's instructions, eventually purifying him as he vanished into the void. As years passed, a younger Well, now equipped with his magical abilities and newfound knowledge, left his home with his belongings, setting out on his journey to become an adventurer. Well had finally made it to the Adventurers Academy, hopeful to make new friends and embark on a thrilling adventure. The academy was bustling with students from various backgrounds, each possessing unique magical abilities. Louise Joland Aurelia Overweg, the third daughter of her family, wielded magical fists. Alina Suzanne Hillebrand, also a third daughter, was skilled with a lance. As Well anxiously waited for someone to approach him, his turn to introduce himself came. To his dismay, silence fell upon the room as he shared his name. The professor distributed sheets of paper instructing the students to form groups, as training would commence the following month. This left him feeling concerned and isolated. During lunchtime, Well found himself sitting alone, while nearby, Louise and Lena attracted the attention of a young swordsman named Erwin von Arnim. Erwin was the fifth son of his family and was drawn to their group due to Well's evident magical prowess. Back in class, the professor emphasized that in order to earn money, the students needed to work together in groups for hunting. Erwin devised a plan with the girls, suggesting that they outshine Well by hunting more animals to impress him. The day arrived when the students exchanged their hunted animals for money. The axe-wielding group had a large boar to their name, but Erwin's group had captured 3 sizable boars, hoping to leave a lasting impression on Well. However, Well entered the scene empty-handed but soon surprised everyone by pulling various animals out of his magical bag. This astonishing display of magical ability intimidated the other groups, causing them to retreat, including the axe-wielding group, who felt that Well was on a different level altogether. When Well received his earnings, he turned to invite others to dine with him but found himself standing alone. That night, Erwin and the girls discussed their family backgrounds, revealing how their families were so poor that only the firstborns were entitled to inherit education and land. They had been discouraged from pursuing their dreams from a young age. Mina passionately argued that they should fight for their aspirations, and Louise encouraged them to use their limited magic to enhance their physical abilities. Determined, they decided to hunt more animals to catch Well's attention. The next day, they ventured deep into the forbidden forest, hoping for better prey. However, they found themselves surrounded by a pack of wolves. Meanwhile, Well, using his magical detection abilities, sensed their predicament and rushed to their aid. In the infirmary after the wolf encounter, Erwin and his group apologized to Well, believing they weren't worthy of being in his group. However, Well wished to be part of their group and reassured them that both sides had been using each other for mutual gain. Shortly after, the professor announced that the Duke of Bleichroder had invited all the Academy students to a grand party. Excitement filled the air as students eagerly anticipated the event. However, the axe-wielding group attempted to undermine Well's worth, claiming that the party was solely to introduce the Duke to Well, disregarding the other students' significance. Nonetheless, the students, including Well and Erwin's group, prepared themselves for the grand party, donning their finest attire. At the event, the Duke introduced himself as Amadeus Freytag von Bleichroder and requested his company. Well agreed, but only under the condition that his group could accompany him, pointing towards Erwin and the girls, who were taken aback by the unexpected invitation. As they entered the Duke's mansion, they were greeted by the court magician, Brantag Ringstadt, who recognized him as a disciple of Alfred due to his magical bag. After confirming his status, Well revealed that the bag contained belongings of the men who had ventured with Alfred and wanted to return them. Later, outside the palace, Erwin and the girls reflected on Well's experiences. To their surprise, he appeared and they confessed their initial intentions to use him. However, he pointed out that both sides had their reasons, and he genuinely wanted to form a group with them. They accepted his offer. Suddenly, Amadeus and Brantag approached, informing Well that, in recognition of his gesture, they would receive a significant amount of money, and that he would inherit his master's inn. In the end, Well found himself in a grand mansion dining alone. As he contemplated the desire to share his newfound wealth, he looked at the list of his group members' names, cherishing the friendships he had formed. Now we see a magical flying ship with Well and his friends aboard discussing Eric's wedding, his brother. Louise dressed extravagantly to catch the eye of a nobleman at the wedding, but she stumbled and leaned on who held onto a bar, nervous about the possibility of the ship crashing. Suddenly, Brantag appeared on the ship, traveling to the capital to report the situation of their domain. He reassured her that magical ships didn't just fall from the sky, calming his fears. However, a dark cloud appeared and Brantag mentioned that it was possible for them to fall prey to a giant dragon. Almost on cue, a skeletal dragon emerged and attacked them. Panic spread through the ship's passengers, but the captain assured them that Brantag would handle the situation. Unfortunately, Brantag explained that he couldn't use sacred magic against the dragon. Instead, he instructed Well to take on the challenge, while he would protect the ship. Well accepted the challenge and confronted the dragon, channeling his sacred magic. With a determined effort, he defeated the dragon, following Brantag's guidance and placing the dragon's bones, including a red gem from its chest, into the sacred bag. Back on the ship, Well expressed his desire to make a purchase in the capital. However, Arterio Marchin, a friend of Brantag and a merchant with political influence, arrived and explained that it might be complicated for him to make such a purchase. Upon their arrival in the capital, the students were eager to go shopping. Brantag excused himself, leaving Arterio in charge. Suddenly, an army approached, and a knight thanked Well for defeating the dragon, informing him that the king awaited his presence. All of them were then escorted to a carriage. They reached the castle, and the students went to visit Eric, leaving Well and Arterio alone. Inside the castle, the king expressed his gratitude to Well and bestowed upon him the title of baronet. As part of the ceremony, Well had to pledge his allegiance to the king. Meanwhile, at Eric's home, Brantag was with the students discussing Well's baronet title. He explained that the boy would now be the head of a new family, separating from his own. The students felt sad, thinking that he might not be able to continue his adventures. However, Brantag reassured them that since the boy didn't have any land, he could still pursue his career as an adventurer, which lifted their spirits. Back at the castle, they began to sell everything Well had captured. A dispute arose regarding how much money the boy should receive, with everyone having their own opinion. However, Cardinal Hohenheim intervened and revealed that Well had been honored as an emissary of light, putting an end to the argument. Arterio explained that the cardinal would expect favors in return for his support. After leaving the castle, Well encountered a man attempting to recruit him as an officer but was stopped by the kingdom's guards. Arterio told him to get used to such attention because, as a baronet, everyone would want to hire him or marry their daughters to him, which exhausted him. The following day was Eric's wedding, and Well met with his siblings, who lamented that the family hadn't brought any gifts, which would reflect poorly on the family's and the Duke's reputation. Well offered to provide the gifts, though he found nobility burdensome. Later, Arterio gave Well a jar of malted rice with koji, thinking Well wanted to trade it. However, Well teleported his friends and himself to his home, declaring it as their new residence. He taught them how to prepare miso using the koji. As he served the miso, he recalled his days as an office worker when he learned the difference between fermentation and putrefaction. The scene ended with him feeding his family and friends. Meanwhile, in front of the cardinal, Elise appeared and he informed her that he already knew who her future husband would be. The ceremony at the church concludes and Cardinal invites Well, who presents a gift in gratitude. Afterward, Cardinal's granddaughter, Elis Katharina von Hohenheim, enters the room and introduces herself. Well notices that she can perform magic. The cardinal explains that she uses healing magic, and despite being called the saint of their family, he wants her to get married. The cardinal informs him that she has several suitors, to which Well jokingly suggests joining them. However, the cardinal takes this seriously and hastily arranges their engagement within a minute. Later on, the cardinal speaks with his butler, telling him that he had discussed the engagement with the king prior to its announcement and the king had approved. He also mentions that Well had given a substantial gift, indicating that he is aware of the church's power. Meanwhile, Well disguises himself as a clown and confides in his friends about his engagement. He realizes that among the nobility, love marriages are a rarity. His brother's wife helps him with his clown costume. As Well takes to the streets in his clown disguise to avoid being recognized, the man who wanted to hire him identifies him, causing a commotion. People start to recognize him and a crowd gathers. To escape, Well teleports away. Back at their inn, Well complains to Aaron and Eric about being recognized. Eric suggests hiring him as a bodyguard, and he agrees, making him his henchman. Well later teleports to the cardinal's house, where he meets Elise on the rooftop to have a private conversation and get to know her better. In the evening, back at Well's mansion, tells the girls about his new job. They express their desire to be hired as well, but teases them about becoming his subordinates. Not wanting that, they decide to become Well's concubines instead. Louise starts making clothing, explaining to Lena that if she becomes Well's concubine, she could start a school and her family would recognize her talent. This inspires Lena. Well overhears the girls arguing over the clothing as he receives an invitation for a date with Elise. The following day, they are seen having lunch, and after finishing the meal, the butler tells Well that he should give the girl a gift. They visit a jewelry store looking at engagement rings. In the end, Well chooses a simple yet expensive ring with a magical stone. In the carriage ride home, Elise assumes Well chose the ring because it allows him to store mana in the stone. Still, he reveals that he picked it because he thought it was perfect for her. With a touch of mana, he makes the stone shine, revealing the universe within it. Finally, the cardinal consults his butler about his opinion on Well. The butler remarks that he treats Elise like an ordinary girl and that they don't know what he might be thinking. As the episode ends, Well reflects that the lunch would have been better with soy sauce. The guys are at their mansion eating and discussing their plan to resume when they return to the academy, considering it smart because Elise is in the capital. The girl enters and seizes the opportunity to ask Well's friends about him while he receives a task from the king to subdue another dragon, thinking it's a servant's job. Now we see a knight explaining that in the Palkinia Prairie there are enough supplies for the kingdom, but they need to subdue the ancient dragon Gredigrand. Brantag, along with Well and Armstrong, the leader of the court mages, are assigned to this task. Meanwhile, Eric explains that as Well is off to defeat the dragon, his army must deal with the rampaging monsters. Since they don't have an official commander, they formed an impromptu one, and Air, Well's henchman, will lead them as Well handles the dragon. In the meantime, several men appear at the door, ready for battle, and nervously leads them to the battlefield. By night, in a tent, the girls and discuss defeating the monsters when Elise arrives. They summon her to assist with healing the but she becomes saddened upon learning that Well left to defeat the dragon the following morning. That morning, Armstrong struggles in his magical armor, and Well ends up defeating him and capturing the dragon in his magical bag for later sale. However, Brantag and Armstrong inform him that they are about to face many more monsters. Meanwhile, the boys are having breakfast with Elise when a soldier arrives, saying that Well defeated the dragon and that the soldiers are returning. While they are relieved, they soon receive as there were too many monsters on the front lines. At one point, Elise runs low on mana, but recharges it using the gem in her ring, recalling Well's claim that he was just pretending to be a hero when he didn't have much courage. She realizes that if he can make an effort, she should too. Even when she runs out of mana, she continues to attend to the medicines, listening to the soldiers speak highly of Well, saying they owe their lives to him. One morning, a soldier arrives at the camp where Elise is. When she hears Well's last name and that he is, she panics and rushes to see him. However, it's her brother who is on the ground, exhausted. Suddenly, Well appears by her side and she faints from the surprise. However, when she comes back to her senses, he tells her that thanks to hearing her speaking so well him, everything was a success. She tells him that she knows that he's no hero, and this makes him smile. Armstrong rushes over to embrace Elise, revealing that he's her uncle. In the end, everyone is seen moving to the mansion in the capital, and the girls think this plan is in crisis since Elise will be living with Well. Elise questions him if they are engaged to the girls as well, considering they all live together. Well denies it but asks for her opinion on having concubines. Elise responds that it's common, prompting the girls to propose getting engaged to Well, which he agrees to. Now it's Helmut's wedding, and Well's brothers tell him that the country has its eyes on him. They also explain about the upcoming tournament in which he must participate using only a sword without any kind of magic, which makes our protagonist nervous. In the meantime, we see the boys training, but as the girls can reinforce their bodies with magic, they end up defeating who complains about it. Suddenly, they see Well flying and Lena tells them he had to see the cardinal after the ceremony. Later, the boys are with Brantag and he tells them about the tournament and how it would be a disgrace if they were to lose. So if the girls go to train without magic, and stays to rest until Brantag warns him that he could be kicked out of the group if he doesn't make an effort, which scares him. That night, while the boys are eating with Well, he tells them that Warren, the previous tournament winner, won't be participating this time, which makes him feel more at ease as his goal is not to embarrass himself in the tournament. He also informs them that Elise will be a part of the adventurer group, and although she won't participate in the tournament, everyone is happy. is feeling doubtful as he is the only one without magic in the group. Well surprises them by saying that he will win the tournament. The next day, we see everyone training hard. is determined to stand out. When it's time to eat, Well tells them that Warren will indeed participate because the king wants him to win as a requirement to start teaching. Mr. who later asks Well if he would kick him out of the group if he loses. Well reveals that Elise is training in secret because she doesn't want to disappoint them, making her realize that people with magic also get nervous. He apologizes to the girls and continues training. Finally, the tournament day arrives and Ellie shows up with food for the boys, while Well has fallen asleep standing. When it's his turn to fight, he realizes he will face Warren. Although he wants to do his best, Warren defeats him with a single blow. He returns to Brantag and Armstrong, who were spectators. Later, Louise returns, having almost reached the preliminaries, and then we see Lena, who ends up fighting against the boy who always wants to be hired by Well, and to her surprise, she wins. So when Lena returns to Well and Louise, she tells them about this boy named Roderick, who is a merchant and an accountant. When they see Well sleeping, Elise apologizes on his behalf and tells them that he was the one cooking for them. Then, who has made it to the final, is going to face Warren, but since he's armed, the girls tell him he should withdraw. He explains that they could kick him out of the group, and they show him the food Well made, which has encouraging words written on it. Her gains confidence, eats part of the food, and tells the girls that he'll still competes so that Well won't laugh at him. Afterward, we see Warren training Aaron and Lena with Roderick, so we assume that he won. Meanwhile, Well is with Louise, and they are about to start training with Armstrong as their teacher. Some time passes, and tax reports arrive for Well's father, who delegates them to Kurt. In the meantime, Kurt's wife and their son Carl visit him and mention that someone wants to talk about Well, which angers Kurt. Back at home, Kurt receives a letter from an unknown child, and his wife reads it, revealing that it states Well some ancient ruins. Now we shift our focus to Well, who is happy because 3 years have passed and he is now an adult. Along with his friends, they have become adventurers and are on their first mission free from noble obligations. Suddenly, Brantag arrives with a letter from the king ordering Well to go to some ancient ruins, making him feel like nothing has changed. On their way to the ruins, they ask Brantag why he's accompanying them, and he explains that the king ordered him to look after them. Many adventurers were sent before and none returned, so they suspect a dragon might be there. Since they registered under the name Dragon Busters, they feel obliged to go. Upon entering the ruins, they get caught in a magical trap recognized by Brantag as being from the ancient magic civilization. It begins to teleport them. When they reappear, they find an inscription that reads Inverted X, and Brantag explains that they've been sent to the bottom of the ruins and need to find their way back up. They can't teleport because they don't know the place. So they start climbing the stairs and reach a corridor leading to a room full of golems. The door closes behind them, and the golems come to life, attacking them. The group fights back, prioritizing that Well doesn't use all his magic. After defeating the golems, they discover the skeletons of previous adventurers. Then they encounter more golems through a staircase. Meanwhile, in the castle, the king tells Armstrong that it has been 5 days and people are spreading false news about them being. People who support Well are now worried. A group of individuals laughs at this false news, mentioning that those who support Well will pay the price. Next, we see the brother of this officer, who desires his position and started the rumor. He's the one who sent the letter to Kurt, hoping to make Kurt's children, the heirs of everything Well owns, wishing for Well's actual demise. Returning to the ruins, they have been fighting for days, taking turns to sleep. Suddenly, they reach a seemingly empty room, but a golem dragon awakens in the center, along with more golems entering the room. At one point, they seem helpless as the golems have Lena, and Ellis is using up her magic reserve from her ring. Then Well gets an idea to combine his magic with Brantag's, but it still isn't enough to defeat the dragon, and they're running out of mana. Ellis notices this, and after healing Lena, rushes over to cast a light spell on Well. This leads to a kiss, and it enhances their power, allowing them to destroy the dragon and win. However, both of them pass out. When they wake up, Well is in a bed, and he overhears the girls talking about Elise's spell. They mention that the kiss wasn't necessary, but understand why she did it. Enters and calls them, extremely excited. Later, Well and Elise enter a sort of library within the ruins where they find Brantag. He explains that these ruins were built by Count Ichelberg, the magician who wanted to protect his legacy. The group shows Brantag many ancient ships that serve as magical cores. there activates a lever, opening a hatch that appears to lead to a hideout. Upon returning to the castle, they start going through everything they collected, and it's revealed that the king will buy everything except the magic circle, which will be purchased by the Mage Guild. The sum the kingdom will pay each of them is 2 million gold coins, which surprises Well. Later, while having tea with Armstrong, Well informs him that they will leave the capital to become adventurers in Brightburg. The man agrees and vows to find the one who started the rumor of Well's. This revelation surprises him, but Armstrong explains that when one advances, they attract envy. The group rejects their 2 million gold coins each, deciding to give it all to Armstrong. Consequently, Well will receive 10 million gold coins, which he expects will lead to more problems. Meanwhile, at the house of the finance officer's brother, a gathering of people who hate Well convenes. Upon learning that Well survived, they start plotting how to make him disappear. At this point, a hooded figure is shown observing Well and the group while they dine. Well mentions that they will leave the mansion in someone's care since they need someone loyal. They decide to hire Roderick for this role, as they usually ignore him. They offer him the position with a cake, and he accepts. Later, Louise senses the presence of the hooded person and alerts everyone. Roderick advises Well to leave the capital and find the person behind the rumor of his. However, he wants to take action. The hooded person is revealed to be a girl. Next, the group goes to the Magic Guild, where the guide leads them to Lucas Goetz Beckenbauer, the laboratory director. Well asks him to let him use his magic circle, which can materialize whatever they imagine. In the process, makes a comment about the advantages of such a circle for distracting Well. This causes the guides to appear, embarrassing Well and angering the girls. In their second attempt, they all cover themselves, and Well successfully materializes what he desires right in front of him. Back at the mansion, Well hosts a thank you party. Roderick reveals that the person who spread the rumor was the brother of the finance officer, Well's unrecognized son. He created the rumor of Well's plan to instigate an investigation. When the girl who has been observing them sees all the food they are serving with the tuna that Well created from the circle, she rushes to break into the mansion. Approaching him, everyone tries to defend him. However, when she finally stands in front of him, she starts eating. Mariscal Edgar arrives and introduces her as Vilma Etoll von Asgahan, his daughter. She offers herself as a bodyguard or concubine. Rangtag then appears, explaining that she has the hero syndrome, which magically enhances her physical abilities, making her incredibly strong. Well tells them that he intends to go to Brightburg to live off hunting, but Mariscal Edgar surprises him by saying that you will hunt monsters there. The Duke also approaches and informs Well that he indeed has a favorite ask. The scene shifts to Kurt's wife informing him of his brother's and how their son will inherit everything. Kurt's avaricious reaction terrifies her. However, when she looks out the window, she is surprised to see Well along with all the other kids. Now at Well's parents' house, he happily drinks tasteless tea when Branteg informs him that the Duke has ordered Well and him to purify all the perished in the evil forest before they become liches. Since this forest is on Kurt's family land, Kurt demands a tribute for the things they will obtain inside it. Branteg agrees, and Kurt asks Klaus, the former mayor and their employee, about the amount of the tribute. Klaus responds with 30%. Kurt insists they must pay 50%, and if they don't agree, they can leave. Hernan, his other brother, tells Kurt they will collect the soldiers' belongings for their families and shouldn't charge so much. However, Kurt argues that since they are poor, those belongings have no value. He also rejects Elise's offer to perform new funerals because he thinks she's doing it for charity, which angers Er, leading to an argument. Well calms everyone down and accepts his brother's deal, though the girls defend Well by telling Kurt that even though he's the younger brother, he's still a baron. This angers Kurt even more, and Well notices the change in his brother. Next, Kurt starts giving orders to the villagers to work, but they inquire about Well and his work purifying their relatives. He becomes furious, and his assistant tells them that his little brother is just an adventurer and won't stay there. The scene shifts to Kurt's house, where Marlene, Hernan's wife, has prepared a pie and shows support for Well. She tells him that her grandfather is also an and he promises to return her belongings. She can suggest that he should be the lord of the domain, which scares Hernan as Kurt hates Well because he's afraid of losing his inheritance, leading to a succession crisis. The next day, the purification begins, and the group starts insulting it, causing them to appear. Well, with Elise's help, expands the purification range, creating a field that automatically purifies any crosses it. They finish off all the but they still haven't found Marlene's grandfather. Suddenly, a wyvern, an dragon, appears, and Vilma splits it in two with her axe, making it possible to purify it. Then numerous monsters start appearing, and the group fights them and purifies them one by one. They finally confront Marlene's grandfather, who had turned into a lich. He asks about his granddaughter, and Well tells him she's safe with a good man, calming him down before Ellis purifies him. Returning to the village, they hand over the armors to the villagers, who thank them. However, Kurt arrives and tells them they must deliver the armors to the blacksmith Eckhart, because the domain doesn't have enough iron. The villagers protest since they don't have bodies to bury, and they want to honor their relatives by using the armors for their funerals. Kurt refuses, so Will intervenes and prevents him from taking the armors by giving Kurt a large iron block, which infuriates him. The villagers express their gratitude, and many believe that Well should be the lord of the domain. Well then returns to the Duke's place, but the Duke orders them to return to the village until they finish sorting the belongings of each person to be handed over. Back in the village, the mayor hosts a funeral, where Elise leads the prayers. The villagers discuss Kurt's absence, and the mayor overhears. As night falls, they have a small gathering, and the group entertains the people. The mayor appears and asks Well to become the lord of the domain, mentioning that the palace wishes for it. Brantag arrives and confirms that the palace indeed desires Well to be the lord of these lands. The scene ends with the king walking with his allies. We see the king with his allies sitting at a table, looking at a map of the kingdom. Brantag tells Well that the palace has wanted to expand the lands of the village, but they couldn't because the lord of the domain is just an ordinary person. So when Well appeared, they saw an opportunity to replace him, which is why they sent him to eliminate the and ensure that the people want him as their lord. This angers his brother, who attempts to kill him. We then transition to Well's family home, where he is having a meal with the others. They ask him why he hesitates to accept the Dominion when his brother is looking for him. Later, his nephews, accompanied by their mother, come to play with Well, and the group notices that he hesitates because by accepting the Dominion, those children will lose their noble status. In the background, the mayor is spying on them. That night during dinner, they hear commotion outside the house. Herman, along with Well and Brantag, teleports to see that the villagers are demanding that Well becomes their lord, even if it means facing Kurt's punishment. Well calms them down and asks for some time. Meanwhile, Brantag realizes that the mayor was spying on them and confronts him, telling him not to act behind their backs. The mayor warns him to be cautious of Amelie, Kurt's wife. Amelie overhears her husband yelling at his allies that anyone who rebels will face punishment, along with their families. Well asks Brantag what will happen to his brother if he takes over the Dominion, and Brantag informs him that since Kurt is dangerous, the palace will eliminate him. The next day, Well meets with his brother to try to reach an agreement, but Kurt takes it the wrong way. As Well leaves, he encounters Amelie, who tells him she's doing her best to make Well bond with her children, so they won't lose their status. She also mentions that she's ready to become a mother, regardless of anything else. Well hears this and returns to the others. He informs them that he will become the lord of the Dominion, all while making mayonnaise with everyone. They reassure him that they'll always be by his side. The following day, Well and the group set up shops, offering products from the capital, causing Kurt's allies to lose customers. They confront Kurt, and he realizes that, as a magician, Well would win in a confrontation. That night, Kurt's allies are surrounded by Well and the group. The next day, Kurt's assistant tells him that all of his allies have betrayed him because Well gave them money to study in the capital and improve their skills. Meanwhile, Well is in the capital with Roderick, looking at a house for Amelie and her children and planning to put Kurt in a church asylum where the palace won't touch him. While they are walking through the market, discussing those who support Well and those who don't, they notice the messenger who delivered the letter to Kurt receiving an artifact from the brother of the finance officer. This man departs, and we return to Kurt, who has been abandoned by his assistant, who also received Well's offer and left. That night, Kurt decides to kill his brother with a dagger, but the man with a magical artifact called the Dragon Tamer's Flute appears and tells Kurt that with this artifact, he can kill him. Kurt receives the artifact as the man tells him that the only thing the auditor Luckner wants in return is to do business once he becomes lord. The next morning, we see Well with the group, and they have spread a rumor that he would be alone in the forest. Kurt arrives, implying that he believes he will win. The group hides, and Well encounters his brother. Kurt begins calling out to the group, saying that he knows they are hiding. They come out, and he shows them the artifact, claiming that he could summon thousands of dragons and destroy Well, the city, and even his family just to seize power. Kurt goes to touch the artifact, and Brantag tries to stop him with a spell, but he fails and accidentally hits the artifact. As Kurt starts playing it, they see souls rising from the ground, realizing that they tricked Kurt, and the artifact is actually a resentment flute. It causes all the resentful souls to turn him into a giant undead. Well is in shock, and Ellis starts purifying Kurt before she is defeated. Well reacts, and together they manage to purify Kurt, destroying the artifact. Kurt's corrupted soul flies away and reaches the auditor Luckner, along with all his allies who were celebrating Roderick's newfound trust with Well. Kurt's spirit breaks the illusion and starts disviving them. The next day, Well is with Roderick, who tells him what happened. Now Amelie and her children won't be able to go to the capital, as they are the children of and they will have to hide at Herman's house. Well understands this, and back in the village complains to Armstrong and Brantag about how the palace moves everything without considering others. Brantag makes him realize that he is also a noble and can act differently. That night, while having dinner with the group, he's deep in thought. He promises Elise that he will be a good noble. The next day in the castle, the king hands over the dominion of the lands to Well and asks if he needs anything to make them prosper. Well only asks for the authority to grant 2 noble titles, as many titles have become available due to the death of his former allies. The king becomes offended, and there's a heated argument among the nobles. It ends when Armstrong silences them. Although he initially had a different plan, he offers Well the authority to grant the 2 titles and elevates him to the rank of count. After the assembly, it's revealed that the king and Armstrong had planned this all along. Well then visits Emily and the children, telling her that when they come of age, he will grant them their noble titles if they still desire them. This comforts her, and she thanks him, saying that their children will understand that their father acted wrongly. We then see how Well is developing the village, working alongside the citizens, built in various places including a cathedral for his former allies who helped him throughout his journey, and a miso factory. However, his friends arrive asking for favors, which confuses him greatly and amuses Elise. In the end, he is seen having dinner with his friends, the same meal he had at the beginning of the series, realizing how delicious it is.